Hey, welcome to Genre Exposure, a film podcast. Join us as we explore the wide world of cinema, brighten our horizons one movie at a time. I'm one of your hosts, Dustin, and as usual, I am here with Jason.
Hey, everyone.
What's up, my dude?
Doing well, feeling good. I lost my virginity last night.
What?
Oh, my Rocky Horror Picture Show virginity, I mean.
Holy shit, I was about to have so many questions.
Yeah, for somehow, all these years, I have avoided seeing Rocky Horror live with, like, the audience participation and everything. But our local college...
Yeah, not bad for them. They usually just get garbage.
Wow, okay.
I mean, I'm not wrong.
I mean, you know, it's depending on your point of view. But anyway, so they get Rocky Horror Picture Show. Barry Bostwick came and spoke.
He's there. You met him.
I met him. Did a meet and greet. I posted a picture for those of you who might follow us on the socials.
Cool.
But it was a really good time. It had the shadow cast up front. Had a costume contest, and there were people dressed better than the shadow cast. There was this one dude who was Frankenfurter, and the fucker, I mean, he was like 9 feet tall with the heels he was wearing.
That's awesome.
Skinny rail of a dude. But he looked really good. He was a great Frank. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. All the callbacks.
And there was just that great part where you got up and did the time warp, right?
Yeah, well, I half-heartedly did the time warp. I was mostly watching everyone else.
Bro.
I didn't have enough beers. Dude, I got to get wasted if I'm going to dance at all.
Okay, well, I guess I'll let it slide.
But it was a good time, you know, and if you like Rocky Horror, it's something you should probably do at least once in your life, I guess.
So I guess that's going on right now, right? If you're in other places, they'll be
I think
shuffling
it's
on.
like a tour type thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll look for that. I'll put it in the show notes if I find their thing.
And of course, if you live in Central Kentucky, the Kentucky Theater plays it like monthly, I think, you know. So go there and check it out. It's fun. It's a good time.
Cool. Awesome. I love it.
What have you been up to, man?
You know, just existing. Mm-hmm. Starting this new job, getting adjusted to it. I'm liking it so far.
Excellent.
Otherwise, just living life, watching movies, checking out this awesome listener suggestion we're talking about today, Possum from 2018. Directed by Matthew Holness.
It is not about a cute little possum.
1 star, no actual possums. Heads up for a review.
I thought it was going to be about the magical adventures of a little possum.
Not quite, no. But we'll get into that soon. First, we're going to do all our usual stuff, talk about what we've been watching. But also, hey, did you know that we're part of the Prescribed Films podcast network?
I did know that.
Yeah, and that's awesome. And there's all these other cool shows you could go be listening to. I know I just shouted them out last time, but I got to do it again. Brett and Tony with Ash and Abe. Their movie picks right now, dude, are off the chain. They're doing The Shining now. So
nice.
Holy shit! Always love to hear people talk about The Shining.
Sure.
I just feel like there's a bajillion ways you can take that film and pull things out of that film.
Yeah, I recently rewatched it, and man, because I got it on 4K, and it's just such a fucking. I mean, I know we don't need to reiterate this how classic it is, but. If you haven't revisited it in a while, you really should.
Especially if it's been a few years.
Yeah. It's so fucking good. And I finally I know I had mentioned this before in the pod, but I had watched Dr. Sleep.
Yep.
Finally, after rewatching The Shining.
Me as well.
And yeah, it was surprisingly good. It really does.
I want to watch them back to back, I think.
Well, I watched one the night and then the sequel the night after. So yeah, it's fun. It's good time.
Nice.
Good depressing time.
Go check that out. Listen to them talk about that. I'm sure it's going to be super cool. But we had to talk about a thing that's... You and I went on a little field trip.
Yeah, we had a genre exposure field trip.
Went to our local Cinemaplex.
Yeah.
To check out Immaculate.
We did.
Yeah, so what'd you think?
I liked it. I liked it a lot. It was good. I really wasn't sure what to expect. Like, I knew it was like non-Catholic horror, you know? That was pretty much it. I don't even think I watched the trailer. I know it's got... that Sweeney chick in
Sydney
it.
Sweeney.
And she's like
having a moment right now.
She's the it girl right now. So I didn't like I never watched Euphoria. I was annoyed by that fucking trailer for that romantic comedy she's in that they always played before the movies.
Didn't go to Madam Web, huh?
I completely avoided Madam Web. I know.
Jeez. Wow.
So I don't know anything about her, but I thought she was very good in the movie.
She's a great actress. That's the thing. It's like a lot of people like us focus on her physical appearance, which is fine.
She ain't just a pretty face.
Any actress in Hollywood is going to be attractive usually. So
usually to some degree. Yes.
Yeah, she can bring the acting though, especially in this film, like the emotions
Yeah.
that the character goes through.
Yeah.
We should say it's about an American woman who is striving to be a nun, and her little local parish kind of in America gets shut down, and she gets this wonderful opportunity to come to Italy and stay at this very like well-respected, well-renowned convent.
Yeah.
It's kind of secluded off to its own.
Yeah, it's where they take care of like older sisters.
Yeah, older sisters that have like mental issues or health issues, and they kind of give them just a peaceful end of life sort of thing, kind of like a hospice almost.
Some of them may be twisted sisters. I'm not sure.
Well, you see as the film goes on that some are quite twisted. And in the course of her kind of adjusting to her life there and getting used to things, she turns out to be pregnant.
Dun dun dun.
And hence the title, Immaculate. Is seemingly an immaculate conception. Mm-hmm. And then you start to unravel what's going on with that and the mystery of it. And
right.
I thought that they played it very well, and that you never really know, is this supernatural? Is this something else?
Right.
What's really going on here?
Yeah. And it's one of those movies where I really wasn't sure what was going to happen, which I'm always love, when it's not utterly predictable. Yeah, it was well done. It had a kind of a 70s vibe to it, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. The music was sort of a throwback, almost Italian.
There's one cut, and I swear it's like a piece of like library music that's been used in some Italian horror. But
you can never find any source for it.
I can't find it. It's not on the official soundtrack, which that makes me think even more it's a library piece. But...
Yeah, of course, being set in Italy and having largely Italian cast, or at least Italian-speaking cast, it really reinforced the whole...
Yeah.
It reminded me of things like The Church, Michael Soavi.
I felt a lot of that, yeah. Because I was like, are we going to get to the end of this? And there's like a full-on fucking like demon costume person assaulting someone.
But I don't want to say too much about this movie.
Yeah, it's like I really want to talk about where it goes, but it's also too new, so I don't want to spoiler it. So
I want people to go out there and see it, because there's actually a lot of interesting horror playing currently and in the pipeline. So I think this might be a really good year for horror.
And a lot of like
being an election year, it's not too surprising.
A lot of like Catholic-y, like nun-focused stuff too, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Because already now we have First Omen hitting theaters,
which is getting good reviews.
Surprising.
I kind of want to go see it now.
Yeah, maybe. There we go for a double up on the nun horror.
At least it's horror,
But this was great. It's put out by Neon, which they're rapidly becoming one of my favorite like releasing companies, up there with A24. This one even kind of cops the A24 ending, where we get her like staring at the screen screaming, and dude, she fucking destroys that scene.
Yeah,
she's
great.
Really kills it.
She's good. She brings the emotions.
Yeah. So yeah, pretty awesome. Definitely go check that out. But what else have you been watching?
Well, oddly enough, I doubled down on the non-Catholic horror.
Oh, okay.
I watched a found footage film 2018 called The Devil's Doorway.
Okay.
It's on several of those lists of found footage movies you should watch. Blah blah blah.
Okay, sure.
It's set in 1960, and there's these two priests, a young priest and an old priest. They are sent by the Vatican to investigate a miraculous event.
Oh, miracle examiners.
At an Irish home for fallen women.
Okay.
And this is where they keep women who are like, pregnant out of wedlock, mentally ill,
Kind of seems like a companion piece to Immaculate.
Right. And it is good. It's not great.
Oh, okay.
It is streaming for free on Tubi. So,
hey,
there's that.
Can't go wrong.
And it's like an hour and 16 minutes, which is also a bonus if you're short on time. There's a lot to like about it, but the ending kind of left me wanting more.
Gotcha, okay.
And the fact that it's set in 1960 and it's found footage, you're thinking, okay, what kind of equipment did they have that they could make it found footage? And they don't really sell it too well. Because they show some of the equipment they're using, and it's just, it would just be way too bulky to be doing the things that they're doing. Because you've got, not only do you have the actual camera, but you've got the, actual film on a separate case you have to have strapped around you,
right?
And then you've got to have a separate sound, a microphone. Maybe you could hook it up to the camera, but still, You also have to have a separate light source, you know, so it's all this stuff.
The
you're
logistics
working
of
with.
that gets a little hairy. Huh?
Yeah, it's a little, okay. You really have to just sort of go with it and accept it.
Well,
But it's you could you could spend an hour and 20 minutes of your time in worse ways.
sure, okay.
You know, if you watch it, you're not going to be like, "Oh God, I just wasted my time." But I also don't expect it to be like, "Whoa, one of the best found footage movies ever." Blah, blah, blah.
It's just one of the movies of all time.
Yeah, it has some good performances, especially the priest, the older priest. What's his name? Olaylor Roddy. He's really good. He's pretty much in every scene. He kind of carries the movie.
Okay.
But yeah, you know, check it out if you want.
I mean, I find that when it comes to found footage that usually a lot of them aren't good, but I'm still somehow okay with watching them.
I like found footage.
Yeah.
I really do.
I can just like, that's like popcorn or something, man.
I will almost, sometimes that will like if I'm on the fence about something and I find out it's found footage, I'll usually check it out.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, how about you, man? What have you been watching?
There's a lot I want to talk about, but I'm going to try to be reserved. So
Yes.
I picked this one because I feel it may also be worth bringing up in relation to this film, perhaps. I went with a documentary.
What? You don't usually
Rare
come with
for me.
docs.
Yeah. It's technically a mini series, I guess, but it counts. It's on Letterboxd, so you know.
Okay.
And I want to talk about Quiet on the Set, the dark side of kids' TV.
I haven't seen this.
The blockbuster documentary about the many scandals of Nickelodeon over the years of their production, particularly centering around one of their big producers, Dan Schneider, who, of course, got his start kind of with all of that, and then went on through many of the prominent Nickelodeon shows all the way up until his eventual kind of fading from...
So this would be like the 90s,
Yeah,
early
primarily
2000s
the 90s
era.
and then up into the 2000s.
So this is pretty much when you were watching Nickelodeon.
Yeah,
maybe,
that's
right?
why, like, if you are in my, like, age group range, this will probably hit you really hard just because it's, like, it's all the shit we watched as kids.
This is the era right after when I was watching Nickelodeon. Basically.
Yeah, so it's gonna be it would be a little different to you, but man, it was a hard watch, and I'm glad that they made it because there's a lot of like this stuff that need to be told and talked about and discussed, and I think the big thing you take away from it is a lot of this stuff that happened is because there weren't like the laws in place or the policies or things like that to kind of prevent these sort of things,
And people are basically garbage.
yeah, and people are garbage, and if you don't have those rails, then there's no hope. So in that respect, I'm glad that this existed because it's good to get into all of that, and it's good that people are talking about it and looking at this, and even others are getting their chance to come forward and tell their stories now. But as a documentary, judging it as a piece of film that I watched, I kind of thought it was on the weaker side of things.
Okay.
Just because like it seemed very unfocused at times. Like their thesis statement is like, here's this Dan Schneider guy, he is a problem, and he was like the host to all these many problems. That's like your thesis statement. And then when you get into like exploring all the information they have, it gets in weird directions where like for a while we're not even focused on him, we're focused on other guys. There was 2 other people that worked there that were like turned out to actually have like assaulted people and got convicted and were pedophiles and stuff, and that's like an even bigger thing to do. And it's like they worked on the same shows together, but like it seemed like that was like its own story that also needed to be told in its own
despite
way.
their record, they were still hired on these kids shows and stuff like that.
Well, I think at the time they were hired on, there was no convictions or anything on the record, but
right.
which that's one of the things that pissed me off the most, because the one guy who was like really terrible, I don't even remember his name, and he doesn't even need to be mentioned, so whatever, but he fucking like he gets convicted, he gets caught on all this, he gets like some little slap on the wrist, like prison sentence, gets back out, and the second the fucker gets back out, he gets hired by Disney to come on there and be like an acting coach for, I think it was The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, which I never watched that. I was never much of a Disney kid thing, and I was like, fucker is like registered sex offender, and you're hiring him to be an acting coach on a kids show?
Yeah.
And that's where like I felt like the documentary failed a little bit, because like that's a sentence in this documentary.
You think you should have focused
And
more
I'm
on
like,
that. All right.
And it may just be the way that times have changed, right? Because I took a lot of journalism classes in college, and it's like, to me, it's like, ooh, there's your story. Run that shit down. Why did they hire him? How did they hire him? What happened there? and then it's like that's just like a footnote, and then they go back to the Dan Schneider dude, and it was one of those things like they didn't have the people, right? Like there was lots of people that could have talked to them, but none of those people agreed to. So it's like you had people and they had things and they brought up stuff, but it's like you never had the smoking gun, right? You never had like the big truth bomb that would like set everything off.
Right.
Like they rested a lot of stuff on Amanda Bynes, which again a prominent Nickelodeon star, and she's had her own mess to do going on, and like they centered a lot of stuff on like people being like, well, I bet that she thought blah blah blah, or I bet that she did da da da. But she wouldn't talk to them. Her family wouldn't talk to them. No one that could like speak on her behalf would talk to them.
Right.
So at the end of the day, it's like you did a whole episode just on people speculating about her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it felt very like, I hate to say it, but like TikTok-y.
Sure.
Where it's like people saying like, I bet blah, 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 blah. And then hoping you just run with that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I felt that was like enough to really.
It's not exactly hard-hitting journalism.
I've heard that they're coming back with an additional episode because I guess after it came out, now more people are wanting to kind of chime in. Right. So hopefully that strengthens it some. And then some of it too, like, I don't even know if I wanted to talk about this, but like the big reveal, and you probably at least know this even if you haven't seen it, but like the one guy that went to prison over all that stuff, it was like one of the stars that he had assaulted, and he was like identified as like John Doe in the court case, and the person finally came forward, and that was Drake Bell, star of what was it, Drake and Josh, and several other Nickelodeon shows.
I'll take your word for it.
And so he speaks on there, and he kind of tells his story, and it's very harrowing to go through that episode. It's very tough, but it's also kind of weird because like if you follow celebrities and news and stuff, he has his own court case that happened where he was like maybe kind of grooming someone that was a minor. And there's a lot of like this person said this and that, and maybe he didn't know her age or what, but it seemed like if that's like your ace in the hole, and then like he's maybe kind of vaguely guilty of like a similar thing.
Well, I mean, this sort of dovetails into our movie today.
It does, and that's why I selected it.
Abuse is cyclical.
Yes, because abuse is cyclical, and that was another thing that I thought they should have spent more time on. But again, the documentary kind of just like gave it a sentence and then brushed on.
Right.
Because he was like their like really key important person to like dish a bunch of stuff out. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, perhaps the next part will shed some light on things.
So its heart was in the right place, but I felt it could have been put together maybe a little stronger. But maybe, and I'll say this in their defense, maybe this is all they had, and the idea is like we can start that conversation, and then that will inspire others to finish and get to the depth of all of this.
All right. Well, I've found that some of those like documentary series, the limited series, can be a little meandering sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like they're padding just to get extra episodes in. I mean, Netflix is horribly guilty of that.
So it's good. It's harrowing. I think if you are, again, if you're in my age range and you grew up with any of these shows, you kind of owe it to those people to watch it, I think, and hear their story. Because it is really shitty. And especially for a thing that was supposed to be making shows for kids to inspire them, to make them laugh, to entertain them.
Yeah. It's one of those stories that reinforces your belief that, the world's a fucking cesspool, especially, Hollywood. And it's people that we want to admire and like, and they make things we love and consume, but then they're all so fucking shitty. And it's just...
So yeah, man, tough stuff. But yes, it in a way relates to our film, and I thought of it as I was watching this movie. So
yes.
I thought it was best brought up right now.
Excellent. Well, then let's just get in and talk about the movie of the night, Possum.
Hell yeah. All right, so today we are talking about Possum from 2018, directed by Matthew Holness, and this film was recommended to us by Erica of Unsung Horrors.
She of great taste.
She of great taste. I always knew, I was so jazzed to ever watch this film, and then she suggested it, and I was like, yes, awesome.
Yeah, it's been on my radar since it came out. It's just one of those things I never got around to.
And I think part of it is, and we should just go ahead and get this out, you may know Matthew Holness from a little show called Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
Hilarious.
It's one of the greatest British comedy shows to ever exist.
Hilarious. I love the concept. If you haven't seen Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, it's basically he plays a horror author named Garth Marenghi.
Yes.
And the conceit is that this was a kind of a failed TV show that was made in the 80s.
Based on his
books and stuff.
Yeah.
And he starred in it and wrote it.
And it's very, it's kind of punching at something like Lars von Trier's The Kingdom, where it's like a hospital and there's a lot of supernatural occurrences going on.
Right. It's got Matthew Barry in it.
Yes, and God, it is one of the funniest shows to ever exist.
It's hilarious. It's great. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's so hard to do bad acting intentionally. Yeah. But, I mean, they knock it out of the park. They do a really good job on it.
And they do the thing, too, where, every episode starts with him, and he's like, "Hi, I'm Garth Marenghi."
Yeah.
And he, introduces
Talks
the
about
episodes.
how awesome he is.
Yeah.
And, also has one of the best quotes. I actually used this in an English class once, and the professor thought I was serious. But one of the best quotes is, "Subtext is for cowards."
Oh, man. But it's wonderful, and it's out there. You can find it if you go looking into it. But it's interesting to. That's usually, I think, most people's encounter with him as a creator of any kind, and then to go from that to Possum, which is a very serious, very sobering horror film. Mm-hmm. I think that's cool.
But I mean, and we've said this before, but comedy and horror are cousins. They're so close together.
If you're a master of one, you're probably a master of the other.
Typically, it's all about timing,
right?
It's all about build up and release. And if you're a good comedian and you're good with timing, you can usually translate that over to horror. I mean, Jordan Peele, people like that.
Oh yeah.
So yes, I did not know this was his movie until I started doing a little preliminary research for it.
Interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, let me hit you with the synopsis. Why not?
It's also based on a short story he wrote.
Yes. From some years ago. Mm-hmm. So, after returning to his childhood home, a disgraced children's puppeteer is forced to confront his wicked stepfather and the secrets that have tortured him for his entire life.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's fairly succinct.
Straightforward.
And as far as what genre this is, IMDb has it as drama, horror, mystery.
I'm cool with all of those.
Yeah, they work.
Wikipedia added psychological, which I think you definitely got to have in there.
Yeah, I think psychological. Yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. You could also throw expressionistic. You can also throw minimalist.
Yeah, sure. And British, because this is a British film.
There's a lot of little tags you can add onto this movie.
Yeah, hell yeah. So this is his debut feature film.
Man, he hasn't made anything since this, has he?
Which is a crime, because it's amazing.
Yes, this must be corrected.
But yeah, it was a short story of the same name. It was published in a horror anthology, The New Uncanny Tales of Unease.
And they were all kind of written based on Freud's theory of the uncanny.
Yes. Right? They were told from the publisher to pick a fear that intrigued them or they thought was interesting and write it in a more modern time and not something like back in the day focused. And Holness said he ended up picking two different fears because he thought just doing one was a little cliche. And so he picked the fear of a doppelganger and the fear of ventriloquist dummies.
Two valid fears.
And I think he's right, because fear of ventriloquist dummy, that's been done a lot.
Sure.
And probably doppelgangers too. So to have those intertwined is an interesting premise.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, I think let's just get into the story.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah, we get this pre-title sequence with the main character reciting a poem about Possum.
Yeah. And this is, I'm going to say this film's a little Babadooky. And you kind of have this children's book with a poem in it.
Even the subject matter is pretty
and that that anchors the story. We get little pieces of it. I have the whole poem here. I'll read at some point. But
okay, cool. Yeah, I figured you would get that.
Yeah,
because I didn't.
Yeah, throughout the film, you'll get little chunks of it, and eventually you can kind of piece together the whole story.
Yeah, and this is also, I think we need to prep. This is a sort of movie where it's kind of difficult to talk about a scene for scene sort of linear narrative, because so much of this is a visual film.
Yes. And auditory too.
And auditory, exactly. It needs to be watched. I would definitely recommend, if you haven't seen this movie and you're listening to us right now, go watch the movie first.
Yeah, pause
come
here.
Back and listen to us.
Hit up Tubi if nowhere else. Tubi has it. Screambox has it.
Yeah.
A few places have it.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to get to.
But it made me think of so back when we used to do the movie club, when it was like this podcast before we recorded things. There was a movie that we watched that Colin and me were not so keen on it, but you were very keen on it. And one of your counterpoints that you gave us is that it was like a tone poem. It was more about just experiencing the visuals and the music and the mood of everything, and that mattered a lot more than like the beat for beat plot points that happened.
And which work of art was this?
Was it Headless or The Headhunter or?
Oh yeah, it was Headhunter.
Headhunter, yeah.
I stand by that critique. I like that movie.
And so I think tone poem is a good way to describe this film.
This is a total tone poem.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I've always remembered that incident because I like the way you phrased that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we start with our lead guy here, Philip, played by Sean Harris, who just, you can't say enough about how good his performance is in this film.
Well, you can't skip over that title sequence either.
Okay, yeah. So take us back through that.
And this is part of the visual style you have to watch this movie for. It is a collage of, it's very retro. It's very 70s. It's also very expressionistic. It's like an old industrial film. And this becomes more apparent as we go through here, but Holness was very influenced by those great 70s English PSAs.
Yeah, he mentioned that in several interviews.
And if you've seen any of those, you will immediately feel it. You will get it.
And it's not unlike the like after school movies that we had over here back in the day, but it's the kind of thing where it's meant to shock you, kind of out of like a bad thing that you might do, or teach you about like children being abducted or things like that.
Yeah, stay away from like power substations and things like that. I had a list of some of them, and a lot of them I've seen.
Of course you have.
Yeah.
You sick bastard.
I have.
I have a quote from him, though, talking about this. He said, they were put on between children's programming during the day. You'd see these horrific, terrifying films. You got the impression that the adult world was a very tribal place. Of course, now we know several of those films are fronted by real-life monsters.
Yeah, exactly. The one I was trying to remember is called Lonely Water from 73.
Okay.
And it's about the dangers of just bodies of water, of kids staying out of and not drowning and shit like that. But it's narrated by Donald Pleasance.
Oh.
So
Damn,
already you know it's going to be creepy as hell. And it's got this cloaked specter who is the spirit of dark and lonely water. And it's like right out of Ebenezer Scrooge, this big like hulking reaper guy. And it's just, it's creepy as fuck and it's great.
I don't know that it was meant to be like one of the ones for children, but I always think of Threads, about like the nuclear attack and what would happen if something like that went down.
Right.
That film is fucking harrowing.
Yeah. I haven't seen that one yet, but I've heard a lot about it. But yeah, go back and check out some of these, especially Lonely Water. And there's one about a power substation that's really great too. I can't find that title. But it's like, stay away from those because you'll get electrocuted. And it shows these kids like, it's like, wow. Jesus, they didn't really...
Damn.
They didn't pull any punches. But also, even from just the title sequence, I got big time like Eraserhead.
Oh yeah,
vibes.
There's a lot of Eraserhead in this film for sure.
A lot of early Lynch and Cronenberg too.
It's got the two Davids. My favorite when you find a film that's got the two David thing going on.
Yeah, so all of the director's influences are just. I mean, he's talking to me. He's speaking directly to me.
Because there's several films we've covered on the show that are ones where I'm like, oh, the two Davids are here. And it's like, I think of like Ultrasound or like Come True, where you have both like kind of the trippy surrealness of David Lynch, but then also like the cold clinical
Dude, I'm just going to...
face of science with David Cronenberg.
These are my favorite types of movies.
Yeah.
Like the ones you just mentioned and things like Possum. I fucking eat this shit up.
Oh, yeah. Hell
I
yeah.
love it. Okay, yeah. So let's try to get into it as much as we can. Yeah, we get Philip, we meet him. He is immediately off.
You can tell.
There is something off about this dude. But he's on a train, and he's kind of... Well, we see him getting on the train, and he's holding a bag.
A big old brown bag.
And noticeably, he's holding it like away from himself.
As if he doesn't want it near him or something.
Right. And he's on the train, and he's like watching these like teenage
Yeah, they're
schoolboys.
probably like 14, 15, thereabouts.
And we hear them talking about hanging out at some local area or something. And he's kind of watching this one kid in particular who's like drawing something.
Yeah, he's really focused on this one that's like, he's more of the quiet one of the group.
Yeah.
And he's kind of just on his own drawing.
Yeah.
While the other ones are joking around.
And Philip comes up when the other boys are leaving the train. He asks, what are you drawing?
Yeah, and it's in a real, like, stern, like,
Yeah.
What are you drawing?
Yeah, it's not subtle and it's creepy, you know?
Yeah.
And the kid feels like it's creepy because he just takes the fuck off. As well you should. If some weirdo comes up to you and says, what are you drawing?
But then we get some cool, just like, there's a lot of this film, like, if you look online at reviews, a lot of people are going to say that it's slow, that it's boring, that all this other BS that's just totally wrong. I'm going to just come out of the gate on that, but...
I mean...
This is like establishing...
In those people's defense, they're not wrong. Because if you're used to a certain type of movie, especially a horror movie, like if you really prefer your horror films kind of fast and stupid, this will be slow and boring. You know, and nothing against those movies because I love those movies too, you know.
Time and a place for everything.
But this it reminds me of, I will quote them again. Red Letter Media, Mike Stoklasa. One of the things he always says, defending like some of the early Star Trek films, especially the first one, he's like, I like my science fiction slow and boring. And yeah,
but no, it's meant to be moody. It's meant to be atmospheric.
Yes.
It's just him wandering through this town. I think it's supposed to be Norfolk?
Norfolk, yeah. And it trusts you enough to engage with it. You know, it doesn't treat you like an idiot.
And I think instantly it kind of gives us some hints about who Philip is as a person. He's very quiet. He's very reserved.
Awkward.
One of the things I really noticed a lot of the film you see, especially when he doesn't have the bag, is the way he holds his hands, where they're kind of like directly in front of him and down, as if like if he were seated, they would be resting on his legs. But
right,
it's almost childlike.
Childlike and kind of maybe protective, like a protective sort
Reserved.
of stance.
Yeah.
But he goes into this old house, and the inside just looks like shit.
Yeah, it's garbage. This just looks totally ran down and destroyed.
Yeah. And he sets the bag on the floor, and then we see him looking at a book that he has taken from underneath the floorboard. And
this is our little storybook.
Yeah. And it comes in drips. The story comes in drips. And he goes back out to the main room, but the bag isn't there.
Yeah, it's gone.
It's sitting on a table in another room. And this is so like he's taking the bag out and he was looking at whatever is inside, but all we really see are like giant spider legs.
Yeah, which are great on the poster of this film if you check it out.
Yeah, it's very creepy. And there's a lot of almost kind of surreal pieces of the movie that we're not sure if they're really happening or not. Yeah,
I think it's important to say that our POV is pretty much Philip's.
And Philip is an incredibly unreliable narrator. Yeah. Incredibly unreliable.
But it's not all just him somberly drifting about. We do get another character. And that's in the form of, I believe it's Maurice, but he kind of says it like Morse.
Yeah, Morse. And we don't really know who he is. You're kind of thinking he's his dad at first.
Some sort of father figure.
Yeah. And he's talking with him, and he obviously has some disdain for Morris. But Morris is kind of complimenting him on the puppet.
Yep.
That's in the bag. He says that the legs are very impressive. And Philip says it's a puppet, and he's going to destroy it.
Yeah, we learn a few things in their first conversation that apparently there was a fire in the house, and that's part of why it's so...
Yeah,
ramshackle.
And Philip asks him, like, this place is disgusting. You know, what's going on? Why don't you fix it up?
And another one of the things that gets mentioned is that Philip had some sort of performance, one of his puppet shows, and it went terribly and horribly wrong.
Yeah, we don't know what. We don't know why. We never find out.
We know that it involved Possum, his puppet, and that, like, it scared people, basically.
Yeah.
And it kind of ruined his reputation.
And he was fired. And even Morris has this line, like, you show that to children. And that's, so many of these lines have double meanings.
Yeah.
You show that to children. You know, he could be talking about the puppet. He could be talking about something else.
Yeah.
You know, I love this movie.
And then kind of the next segment it goes into, well, there's some other neat things that get dropped between them. There's a thing about this jar of candy where he asks Philip if he wants a piece of candy out of it.
Yeah, and Philip's like, "What's in it?" And Morris is like, the same as ever, the same it's always in it.
So it seems like there's something weird going on there too.
Yeah, and Philip's like, "No, thank you."
But we get what happens next. It happens several times during the film, but it's these long passages of him just kind of going around the town with the bag with Possum, and he's kind of just looking for a place to toss it and get rid of it.
Yeah, and he's obviously having issues getting rid of it. Like he doesn't want to. It's very difficult for him to separate himself physically from this puppet.
He's reluctant to, and then some of the times when he leaves it somewhere, he'll go back home and it's back there again.
Yes.
Now, did it pop back there, or did he go back and get it? It cuts around in these kind of clever ways where you never really know.
Yeah, and like there's a scene where he's sitting by the lake, and we hear more of the poem.
Yeah.
Which I think we can go ahead and just say, eventually it comes out this is his childhood, like, sketchbook.
Yeah. And that was a connection, I thought, the intro scene on the train where he's asking the kid what he's drawing.
Right.
I wondered if in that moment did he see some of himself in that kid.
Yes.
Here's the quiet kid who's just on his own drawing.
Drawing some
and that
weird
was what
shit.
made him, like, approach him to talk to him.
Right. But in that sketchbook that he had hidden in the floorboard, he has all these sketchings, and this is where the poem, Possum, he also wrote that down.
Yes.
To accompany the sketching.
Shall I read it for you?
Sure, do it.
Sure, okay. Mother, father, what's afoot? Only Possum, black as soot. Mother, father, where to tread? Far from Possum and his head. Here's a bag, now what's inside? Does he seek, or does he hide? Can you spy him, deep within? Little Possum, black as sin. Bag is open, growing wider. What's inside it, man or spider? Little boy, don't lose your way. Possum wants to come and play. Look at Possum, there he lies. Children meet his lifeless eyes. See his nasty legs and tongue. When he wakens, watch him run. Wait a while, my little child, for what is playing dead, Possum with his black balloons will eat you up in bed. Happy Valley painted black, all the children in a sack. Wave goodbye to sun and moon, say hello to black balloon. The parcel opened, out it sprang, the black long-legged Possum man. Children run, he'll eat and smother any child without a mother.
It's so good.
Love it.
That's great.
Fucking love it.
That's great.
I guess this film's not big enough to do it, but for Babadook, they made that special edition that had a replica of the book. I would fucking love a replica of this one.
Yeah, I would get that totally.
Because the art is so just like the black shadows and the shading of it and stuff.
Yeah.
So cool.
It's really good. But yeah, we keep seeing, like, there's a shot where he's by the lake and he's got the bag next to him. Mm-hmm. And then, it'll show something else for a second and come back and the bag's open and the spider legs are out.
Yeah, like it's trying to emerge.
Yeah, it's like this thing just cannot be contained.
Mm-hmm.
We get a scene where Philip's borrowing some tools from Morris. And Morris is working on this old puppet himself. Yeah. And he says, like, puppetry's been in their family.
Yeah, he says it runs in the family. And that's where Philip's like, we're not related.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because he says, your father made this puppet. And Philip says, yeah, you're not my father. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then we realize, okay, so they're family members, but it's not his dad. Great. Or also, I was thinking, could it just mean, like, he is his father, but not his father? Like, he wasn't a good father. So I was wondering that when I saw it.
I could see you reading it that way too. Yeah.
Also, part of the unreliable narrator issue is the fact that Philip's hanging out in his room and the TV's on, and it's just white noise. But then suddenly it comes in.
Yeah, we get like a news channel.
Yeah, and it's a news report about a missing schoolboy, which is the boy he spoke to earlier on the train.
Yeah. And that's a little concerning the first time it comes up. Because then you're like, ooh, what's going on?
Yeah. But as soon as the report's over, it goes back to static. Mm-hmm.
And one of the other oddities, it happens like pretty much every time he comes home. Right in the entryway, like off to the right, there's this one door. And it's closed. Yeah. Like fully closed. Yeah. And he'll often think about opening it and going in there. Yeah. And at one point, Morris even kind of talks to him about it. Yeah. And it's like, oh, aren't you going to go in there? Uh-huh. and it seems like he's hesitant.
He never has the balls to open up the door.
Yeah, he's a little afraid of what's in there.
So he's walking away from the house at one point, and he's got his bag with him as usual. And some like school-age boys see him, and they're looking, and they talk to each other, and they call him a pervert. And then he's standing outside of his old school.
I love this scene quite a lot.
It's after school, obviously, because there's no one around, and so a teacher or someone comes out and it's like basically, oi, piss off.
He's like, hey, or you get out of here.
Yeah, you're some creepy guy staring.
And he
at the
says,
school.
I used to go here.
Yeah, right.
This was my school when I was a kid.
So this could be, this could be read in two ways. Either it's him, like you just want to go visit and see your old school again. Yeah, perfectly harmless, maybe. But then you've got some kind of creepy looking guy looking at a school
for kids,
and then you're thinking he's up to no good, which is the truth, both. And this is also probably a good time to point out the fact that his town looks like, again, a Eraserhead. Yeah, everything is
desolate, abandoned.
There's very few people. All the buildings are in disrepair. It could almost be post-apocalyptic.
But it never suggests that. It's just that's just how it feels.
It's just run down and grimy, and
he goes to this one area that's like kind of like the remains of like a factory or like a military site.
Yeah, it's a military base.
Yeah, military base. That part really made me give like the Eraserhead vibes. And with the conversations with Morris, there's a little bit more we tease out about Philip. One of the things he does is that he asks Philip to like recount when he was bullied as a kid in school.
Yeah, story about the fox.
Yeah, and it was basically that there was this like fox that they found that they thought was dead, right?
Yeah, it was like sick. Yeah, and they start beating it and kicking it and killing it, and they're like force Philip's face into it, like into its guts and stuff like that. But then Philip says that when the boys run off, Philip's there left by himself, and he looks over, but the fox is alive. He gets up, and runs off.
And then they kind of tease into that too, because there's that one scene where he's kind of out in the wilderness and he comes across a fox, and it kind of regards him for a little bit and then goes off.
Yeah. And there's a scene where he's up by the marshes, and it's kind of a shallow stream, and he gets the guts and he throws the bag in there and tries to leave, but then basically has like a panic attack.
Yeah, he flips out.
Runs back for it, and the bag's open, and Possum is out of the bag. Like it tried to crawl away, and it's laying in the mud. And I guess we need to talk about Possum itself, too.
Oh, I'll say this scene, and then we should talk about it.
Okay.
Some of the times he goes to sleep in the room upstairs, when he wakes up, Possum is like in the bed with him.
Yeah, it's in the bed, yeah. And you get very fleeting glances at it, too. Like, mostly you're just seeing the spider legs.
But the first time you get to see it full on, man, whew.
Yeah, it's creepy.
So describe Possum for us.
Okay. So Possum, yes, it has the big, long, spindly spider legs. And what look like almost entrails for a body. Yeah. And you can see where this area where you're supposed to put your hand up.
To control it.
Yeah. But the head is like, it's like if someone cut off Uncle Fester's head and stuck it on a puppet.
Yeah. It's like porcelain-ish.
Yeah. But it's not exactly lifelike, but it's also close enough.
And also it's very close to resembling Philip's own face.
Yeah. And it's bald, and it has just this blank dead stare and kind of an open mouth. Yeah. It looks like a corpse. So it's pretty unsettling.
Especially the fact that it has the eyeballs too.
Yeah.
It makes it really creepy.
And he'll be like walking around this town, and he thinks he sees Possum looking at him from a window and stuff like that. Yeah. So again, you don't really know what's real and what isn't.
Yeah. Is he imagining this? Is it really happening? But yeah, so yeah.
Morris has a line at one point that says that he says it's waking up, isn't it? It wants to get out. And he keeps kind of like giving Philip a hard time because he knows he's going through this thing where he wants to get rid of the puppet but can't.
Yeah, he's having a struggle there. And then eventually Morris brings up the whole police thing because he says, "Hey, have you seen the news? Authorities keep saying that there's a man that abducted this child, and the description sounds like you. Sounds like that brown coat you always wear." And also, I want to talk about the scene in the woods. There's a part where he tries to go into the woods and dump Possum in between some like trees.
Oh yeah.
And we get these shots where it'll go back to that moment, and he is like there at the tree, and the bag is opening, and Possum is coming out, but it's like shadowed. Like everything else around him is black,
Right.
other than just that spot with the tree.
Yeah. And the tree itself, it's like you can't really see the trunk. It's like
Yeah.
the branches are growing up out of the ground. It's probably a certain type of tree. I don't know what it's called. But the branches themselves just look like spider legs
Yeah.
coming up out of the ground.
It's very, very atmospheric.
And you'll notice as the movie progresses, Philip's walking around with the bag, but he's not holding it with quite as much disdain as he was before. He's carrying
It's
it
getting
closer to his
comfortable.
body. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, he goes into those old abandoned army barracks that Maurice is talking about. He says he was like reading in the paper saying, "Oh, they're finally demolishing those barracks."
Which, by the way, he's played by Alan Armstrong.
He's great.
Dude fucking kills it.
This is the type of role that a lot of actors wouldn't have the balls to do.
Yeah.
You know, you have to be like a capital A actor to pull this off.
For sure.
But he takes it and he's out in the courtyard of these old abandoned barracks, and he's holding the puppet up. And this is a really unsettling scene. This is a great thing about the movie is that simple things are so unsettling because he's like holding it up and it's like looming over him, and the head's like looking down at him.
Yeah, it looks like it's staring at
and
him.
he's bringing it closer and closer to him, like he's about to kiss it or something. And it's just creepy.
And again, that's that fear of the doppelganger, because it looks so much like his own face.
Right. And that uncanny valley where it looks like a human, but it's not. And he throws it down and starts punching it and kicking it. Puts it back in the bag. He weighs the bag down and drops it into... It looks like almost like
It's kind
a
of like
sewage reclamation plant or
yeah,
something.
it looks like a dock or something, but it's kind of like a sewage.
Or a reservoir or something like that.
And so that seems definitive, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
and he drops it in there. He weighs it down. It sinks. He leaves. But he goes back home and he sees that there's the paper, the newspaper talking about the schoolboy again. There's a picture of the boy from the train on it.
and here we get a good plot drop. Because then Morris is like, hey, wasn't there a little boy back when you were a kid and he got abducted like this? Something similar happened. He was assaulted by a man in a mask.
Yeah.
And it actually makes Philip start to cry.
Yeah.
Which to me, that we learn later, but it implies that Philip was that boy.
Yes. And Philip also has, at one point, he asks, why wasn't it Morris who burned in the fire? And we keep getting teased about this fire, because we keep seeing images also of black balloons and smoke.
Yeah, there's a great scene where there's these balloons, and like the smoke comes up, and as it covers the balloons, it taints them all black.
Yeah. And you could also see, especially in that main room of the house, it looks like there had been a fire at one point.
Yeah. And then we get the interesting scene where I want to talk about Morse as a entity in this film too. We never see him moving about. He's always stationary in a room. At first it's in the kitchen. And it's like he'll step into the kitchen, and when he enters the kitchen, he's there. And then for a while he is in like a side room with a bunch of books and stuff like that. And then eventually there's a scene in the backyard, which we've seen once before because he went back there once because he thought about burning Possum. But he finds Morris back there burning some trash. And that's one of their long conversations they have, again, kind of about the past and everything between them. And at the end of that conversation, he decides to dump Possum into the fire.
Oh, but wait a minute. He put Possum in the water. Remember?
Yeah.
Because before this scene, Philip thought he had gotten rid of Possum and he was trying to leave. But Morris told him the train lines were going to be down for a couple of days.
Oh, yeah. That's important.
Yeah. And this is the scene also where he's walking along the marshes and sees a dead fox. And he keeps going and looks back, and the fox is up and it runs away from him. And then he goes back home because the trains, he can't leave town. And that's when he sees Possum just hanging on the wall.
Yeah.
Just staring at him when he comes in. So yeah, then he goes out to that with Morris in the burn barrel, and he throws Possum in there. And Morris almost seems like consoling at this point. Almost like a nice guy.
As much as he can be.
Yeah. So he's like, well done, and gives him a cigarette and stuff like that.
But that doesn't get rid of Possum.
Of course not. It's not that easy.
I think we get a few more kind of wandering scenes. I think we're already past it, but there's a great one on this bridge. It's this weird, like, little bridge that's like the floor of it's basically like a 2x4.
Yeah. It's
And
very
the
narrow.
sides are there to like keep you good on it. But there's like a great scene of him like leaning over that, just staring into the water.
Mm-hmm.
And that too makes me think of a doppelganger thing of like your reflection.
Yeah. True.
I always think of you've seen Ghost in the Shell, right? The actual like animated movie. There's that scene where she like scuba dives, and as she's rising to the surface, she sees her reflection on the surface of the water, and like they meet and like merge.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that kind of like is the precursor to the whole like duality thing in that one.
Oh, and all these scenes out on the marsh and stuff like that. I mean, this is right out of that PSA, the Lonely Water one.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
cool. I'll have to watch that. If I can
Yeah,
find
you
it.
need to. It's great. And we get some really cool nightmare sequences too, where like Possum, like Philip will be in the bed and Possum's down at the bottom in the bag and gets up and moves out at him. And it's all very quick.
And dude, these are the scariest fucking parts of the film because
Yeah.
actually, it's one thing to see the puppet and it's disturbing, but then when you see it in motion,
Yeah, and it starts moving. Yeah.
God, it's something else.
It's pretty creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Philip sees yet another news broadcast implicating a man who looks like Philip, fits his description in the case of the missing boy. And Philip is digging around in the burn barrel, and like he's looking for the puppet, but it's not there. And Morris tells him the law came around looking for him earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And Morris also tells him that he's going to be going away on business.
Yeah, he says he has to be out for a while.
Yeah, and Philip will have the place to himself.
He tells him, "Don't bring back trouble to the house." Mm-hmm. And I like it because Philip even questions, like, "Well, where are you going?"
Yeah.
And he's just like, "That's my business."
Yeah. And then we get a scene where Philip is going back to his old school.
Yeah.
And he's obviously distraught. Like, he's very upset and nervous. And he speaks to, like, a receptionist there or something, secretary. And he's asked for a specific teacher.
Yeah, Mr. Grant.
Yeah. He says that, tell Mr. Grant I'm here. He was going to help me when I went to school here.
Yep.
So I've come back to get that help, basically.
Yeah, and he says Mr. Grant knew all about what had happened.
Right.
And he said he would go to the police with me and talk to them about it. And I want to do that now.
Yeah. But he loses his nerve. He's sitting there waiting, and he hears them talking behind the door. You can't really hear what they're saying.
It's very faint.
Yeah.
But
it's the tone is sort of like, what the fuck? What is he doing here? Kind of thing.
I'm not 100%, but I can swear at one point you hear them say, "Call the police."
It could be.
Yeah.
Could be. I may have just missed that.
It's good sound design there, though, because it's so faint.
Right.
It's hard to pull out the
And
exact,
that even could be, maybe that's what Philip heard. You know?
or thought he heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, he runs out.
And this is great because he's fleeing because he's afraid of the police catching him. But then it turns into Possum fucking chasing him. We finally get Possum full on motion. Mm-hmm. And goddamn, some of these scenes.
Yeah, we get all these quick cuts of scenes of him like running through the army barracks and other like back alleys. And he's looking around, looks behind him, and we'll see Possum come out behind a corner.
Yeah, just the
looking
head
at him.
peeking at him. Holy
and
shit.
I don't know if it's supposed to be real, if it's in his mind, if it's a nightmare or what. But it's very effective.
I love the one where I think it's at the barracks and it's like around the corner and you see like one leg come out, two legs come out, three legs come out, and then the head just starts to peer very slowly over the edge.
Yeah.
And there's a great one too where he's in like in a building somewhere and it's like ahead of him and it goes down like a side room and then the like you can feel it the way they shot it, like the anticipation of him walking past that room and not knowing if Possum is in there or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then when he finally gets there, it's already gone.
Right.
But it's like just the buildup of knowing it could be there and having to walk past that point.
It's very tense.
Yeah.
At some point, he goes back to that courtyard where he had like beat up the puppet before.
Yeah.
And he finds it laying there.
It's just chilling.
Yeah. And so he just kind of reaches down and embraces it.
Yeah. And then he passes out, right? Yeah, he passes out. And then when he wakes up, he's at home. Morse is gone. And isn't this where he starts to think that he's becoming Possum? Isn't that what happens?
I think so. He finally gets the courage to go through that door.
Yep. Like the closed room and the entrance.
Mm-hmm. And again, this room looks worse than the others. There's obviously been a fire here.
Yeah, it's charred black.
There's like the remains of a bed on the floor and like burnt clothing laid out.
Yep.
Like 2 people were laying there.
And isn't this where he also finds the photo that's pretty clearly supposed to be his parents?
Yeah, he gets that in a tin earlier.
Oh, yeah.
With his cigarettes and stuff.
His little like stash that he had.
Yeah, it's a picture of his parents. And he's also finding like there's like teeth in a jar.
Yeah, which is weird.
Yeah. And then suddenly out of the corner of the room rushes this man dressed in black. Yep. He's got like a mask on and this bag like Possum lives in. And he's like putting it over Philip's head.
Yeah, trying to choke him out.
Wrestling him to the ground and shit. Get him on the ground, the man takes off his mask and it's Uncle Morris.
Yeah. And he starts laying into Philip, man.
Oh man, this is brutal.
And this is we kind of get the full scope of what's been going on between them.
Yeah.
That Philip's parents died in this fire, and it made him orphaned. And in being orphaned, he ended up in Morris's care. And basically, his entire childhood, he kind of physically and sexually abused him.
Yeah.
I think initially with this masked persona. Mm-hmm. But what he even teases him is like, you knew it was me and you just didn't say anything. So I just kept doing it.
Yeah. And he's like, so Morris proceeds to assault him with his fingers.
Yeah. And you can tell the like crushing weight on Philip with this.
Philip is just breaking down. He's completely regressed. And he can't move. He can't do anything. He can't defend himself. And Philip is doing this creepy thing with his fingers. He's like,
yeah, very spider-like.
Yeah, right in front of him, and he's like sticking his fingers down his throat.
Yeah.
Okay, more subtext. I guess subtext isn't for cowards.
Fun quote, but maybe not accurate.
And like Morris has him on his stomach, and he's like whipping him with his belt. Mm-hmm. He's like, "If you cry, I'll start over."
That's a tough scene.
Yeah. But finally, Philip finds it in himself to start fighting back.
What happens is he notices off to the edge there's this locked case.
Yeah, there's this big case, like a trunk.
And he sees it shake a little bit, and you hear a muffle kind of like...
Yeah. And I'm thinking Possum's in there.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Well, Possum had never really spoken up to this point, so
Right, but I'm thinking, oh God, he's talking now. I mean, anything can happen, right?
True, sure.
We don't know what, all this could be in Philip's head.
Mm-hmm. But that gives him the fight.
Yeah, he's fighting back, and he gets Morris on his back, and Morris is like even laughing at him, like, "Oh, now you're fighting. Now you're a man." Oh.
He's like, "Now you're gonna fight back."
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
But there's like this hole in the floor. I guess from the fire, and Philip is just like pressing Morris's head back further and further until he'll hear it snap.
Yeah, and even though this is the only scene of like major violence in the film, it's pretty brutal. Just the crack of it, and then the way his head kind of lolls there.
Right. And he's dead. That's it for Morris. And then he opens the trunk, and inside is the missing boy, who just doesn't say a word, just gets up and runs out.
Books it, which is what you should do.
That's what you should do. And at the end, we get Philip sitting outside, and he's like cradling Possum's head.
Yeah, it's detached now from the spider body.
Mm-hmm. And he's just kind of staring blankly. The end.
Yeah. Ominous little end.
To an ominous movie.
But what does it mean?
Well, let's talk about that.
Well, I got like bukus of background notes.
Yeah, this one, there's a bit more information available on this one.
So we hit a bunch there at the start, but let's see. I want to talk a little bit more about Wholeness. Mm-hmm. So again, like I had said, he's mostly kind of a comedy guy. That's what you're going to know him for. But he had admitted when talking about this film, he'd always been a fan of horror and like kind of doing those more serious, like heavy themes. And he was worried that he would be able to break away from his reputation for comedies since those had gotten such a large following. But he stated that he much preferred horror films that resonate with the audience and force them to reflect on the experiences after they watch it. And so kind of just talking about some of his influences, he said he had a big love of the 20s and 30s silent films, which he thought were so brilliantly creepy and did so much with so little. And that he really wanted to have some like psychologically affecting body horror visuals going on, which I think with Possum, we get that in spades. And he said he wanted to kind of replicate some of those older film techniques and said that modern films kind of tend to overlook those aspects and in some ways are less creepy to him. He said in some ways he wanted this to feel like a modern silent film. He went back to his idea for the original short story, which, to say what that original story was a character who was unable to verbally or emotionally express himself due to childhood trauma and chose instead to express that pain through a horrific puppet. Pretty spot on to this film.
Yeah.
And he said that he wanted to like take that feeling and that idea of having as little dialogue as possible and to then capture that in film. Which, again, there's not a lot of dialogue, really. A lot of it comes from Morse more than anyone else.
Yeah, didn't they experiment with, like, silent movie type interstitials?
He did, yeah.
Yeah.
Initially, that was, like, one version of the film they were trying to do, and it just didn't quite feel right in the end.
I would also say with the whole, like, 30s and 40s expressionistic influence, this movie easily could have been in black and white.
Oh, yeah.
I'm kind of shocked it wasn't. Sure. Because it's already so desaturated, it may as well be in black and white.
And then you got the PSA films. That's a big aspect. Some other films that he just name dropped. Nosferatu. Of course. He also listed George Romero's Martin.
Yes.
Very obvious connections.
Yeah, especially with the whole rundown industrial location. And the whole matter-of-factness of everything.
And then 1945's Dead of Night as well.
Classic.
When the film got first announced, one of the interviews he gave, he said that this film draws on the dark nightmares of silent German expressionist horror, British classics such as The Innocent and Don't Look Now, as well as the claustrophobic suburban gothic of Pete Walker's Frightmare.
I never have seen Frightmare.
I
keep seeing it referenced, but I've never watched it.
So yeah, a lot of pedigree background there.
Sure.
As far as influences.
He obviously has all the right influences.
Oh yeah. They filmed it in Norfolk. They did a little extra shooting in Yarmouth and Suffolk. They shot it on Kodak 35mm, which I think is important to talk about because it gives the film a certain style to it. You see the film grain and the scratches in it at times, and that kind of adds to the tone of the film.
Yeah, and it actually looks like a movie.
It looks like a real movie. Here's my note about that interstitial thing. He said when he watched that cut of it, it felt like it slowed the film down too much.
I could see that.
And that for pacing reasons, having kind of like the little like voiceover narrations in the poem and stuff made it flow a bit better.
Yeah. I think it was a good idea to dump that approach.
As far as the characters in the film, Holness stated he wanted to get into the heads of these characters. He called the movie a very bleak and understated character piece. He said it was very important to him when he made the movie to have the film through Philip's perspective of the world and for you to be locked into that one POV the entire time.
Oh, yeah.
So that it creates a sort of morally ambiguous situation.
Right. And apparently the main actor, Sean Harris, is extremely method.
Yeah.
And he was just in character the entire time.
Locked in.
Yeah. And he and Alan Armstrong would not interact except when they were, being filmed.
So it's like they had that distance that was between them.
Yeah.
That's cool. Holness had some praise on that, too. He said, speaking of Sean, the great thing about Sean is that he immerses himself in his characters and is able to go to those places and come back with something that's very affecting and, to me, very truthful. He said, we did a lot of prep work together. We discussed Philip, where he came from, what he'd been through, even things that maybe didn't come up in the film, but kind of extrapolations you could have about him as a character. And he says that Sean wasn't really interested in the horror side of it so much as he was in getting to the truth of who this person was, why he is the way he is, and then expressing that to the audience.
Well, I mean, that's what acting is. I mean, I
hate
it when people say acting is pretending or whatever. And it's like, no, you're trying to find the truth of it no matter what you're doing, even if it's something silly.
Yeah.
To really be a good actor, you've got to find the truth of the scene and the truth of your character.
As far as like shooting the film, apparently he said from his comedy days he was used to having to do a lot of retakes and reshoots just to get the right take and have everything go good. And he said that he quickly learned working on this film, especially with Harris, usually the first take was already good and perfect.
Nice.
And so they got to this very like comfortable flow going as they started working on the film. We got to give some background on Possum itself.
He is the star of the film.
He is the star of the film. And it was designed by was it Odd Studios, I think. Is that correct? Sydney?
Odd Studios,
Yeah,
yeah,
Sydney-based.
based in Sydney.
They had contributed to such things as Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, Alien Covenant, Mad Max Fury Road, and Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales.
Some pedigree there.
Yeah. The idea for the puppet came from Holness's fear of spiders.
I guess you're not alone.
I can relate. And he clarified that in the original short story, Possum was made by Philip, who made it from pieces of roadkill and dead animals. And that it was kind of meant to be sort of a connection to the idea of like Frankenstein's monster. Mm-hmm. But they said when working on it for the film, the idea of doing that was a little too much. And it didn't quite gel the way they would have wanted. So they kind of went with this idea that we're going to hide the reveal of the puppet till just the right moment. And since they did that, they wanted to give it a more proper, like, puppety appearance.
I think that was a good move as well.
And in speaking of that, he had said in an interview, you can see something horrific, but once you've seen it, the effect wears off, which is why we want to keep Possum as much of a secret as possible.
Mm-hmm. Also, you got that kind of blank face, just like Michael Myers' mask. You know, you can kind of project whatever you want onto it.
It's like timeless and all powerful.
Yeah.
So with the budget they had, it was pretty tight. They couldn't, go overboard with this. So the amount of time they could spend on building the puppet was limited. So the head, neck, and body was constructed as a simple hand and rod puppet. The body was constructed out of foam latex, and the head was made out of fiberglass. The 8 spider legs were designed by Damian Martin, who made a jointed armature, and that used a multiple pick point of semi-rigid urethane. So the puppeteering rods could be attached at multiple angles and give you kind of the freedom of movement for each leg to feel like it was its own.
Looks very natural.
Own appendage.
And the fact that head's made out of fiberglass means it's going to last for fucking ever.
Yeah.
That's probably sitting, in someone's study or workshop right now.
You just walk in and turn on the lights and there it is. Oh, shit. The puppet's complexity, including the limbs, which were pretty fragile, required them to bring in multiple puppeteers to operate it in any of the times that it was in motion, and that was probably the most challenging part of the shoot.
Which is really only used in a few scenes.
But God, they're so effective.
Yeah, very effective.
And that's true to what they said. If we had more of it in action, it would lessen.
Yeah.
This is one I really want to talk about, the score of the film.
Oh,
we didn't mention it too much on the way.
The music is amazing.
The score is fucking balls to the walls, one of the best film scores I've ever heard. And it was composed and made by the sound effects and experimental electronic music studio, the Radiophonic Workshop. And this was their first soundtrack purposely made for a feature film. They were founded by the BBC in the 1950s, and they basically just made a lot of the sound effects and music for shows that they ran on there.
Doctor Who.
And Doctor Who is kind of the thing they would be most known for. So apparently the editor on the film, Tommy Bolding, when he was working on the movie, he picked one of their old soundtracks for like a TV show and just used that as temporary music. And then when they showed it to Holness, he was like, oh my God, this is perfect. Can you get them to actually score the film?
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's weird. It's like, it's electronic-y, but it's not like a synth-wavy kind of electronic-y. It's like, how would you describe it even?
Well, yeah, they wanted to use the old library music that they had, but then the musicians were like, no, we're going to make a whole new score for this.
Yeah.
Like, oh, awesome. Yeah, I would describe it as ambient, electronic.
Mm-hmm. But it's like an older electronic, It's like...
Oh, it's very 70s.
Yeah, very 70s.
Yeah. It's definitely sort of something like, again, Eraserhead. It has that sort of almost industrial sort of feel to it. But it's not... it's just really good. It's really effective.
The movie premiered at the Edinburgh International Film Festival on June 25th, 2018. It later screened in October of that year at the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival in the States. It got a very limited theatrical release, had 5 theaters in November of 2018, and it finished that run with about 33,000 gross, and then it quickly got a home media release.
Yeah.
It got multiple awards and nominations.
Not a blockbuster.
Not a blockbuster, but it got high critical praise, especially for the performance in the film, the atmosphere, the score. The plotting of the film got some criticism, but where is it today? So, if we go to Metacritic, it's got a 90%, which is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
and about an average rating of 7.6 on oh, that's Rotten Tomatoes, sorry. On Metacritic, it has a score of 64 out of 100.
Mm-hmm.
And then I wanted to note that Fangoria praised this film as one of the best horror films of its decade.
Yep.
I am
probably not wrong
to agree. So that's all the notes I have. Do you have any other notes or background?
Nothing additional. I think you pretty much hit everything.
Yeah.
So I guess we could talk about our final thoughts for this one.
Yeah.
Would you like to go first, or shall I?
I got a lot. So
you go ahead.
Okay. Okay. So this film, I said it earlier, but I'll say it again now. It hits a special line of films that like I just fucking love, and I call it the two Davids. And it's when a film somehow embodies both David Cronenberg and David Lynch. With this film, I got definitely Eraserhead vibes just for the setup, the weird like industrial wasteland thing.
Yeah.
But I also got some Lost Highway vibes in the whole like unreliable narrator. His memory seems a little fuzzy, a little hazy on what's going on, what's happening, and you don't really know the truth. And maybe you're also even afraid of the truth.
Maybe you can't handle the truth.
Maybe you can't handle the truth. And then, did you ever see David Cronenberg's film Spider?
Yeah, I was gonna.
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Yeah, that was one that aptly came to mind, even for the Spider connection too.
Visually, it's very, very similar.
Films that we'd already covered on this show, Come True and Ultrasound, both ones I fucking love to death, that I also think are in this same wheelhouse of like trippy, surreal, weird, out there. You're in the head of the person that you're watching, and you don't really know what's going on.
Literally.
Some other films I wanted to mention. I think it's hard not to talk about the movie Magic from 1978.
Ah, yes.
That's like the true OG of like the puppeteer who has the crazy like mental breakdown.
Anthony Hopkins, right?
Yep, Anthony Hopkins, and that psychosis is kind of projected through the puppet. Got to mention the Babadook again because you have that like storybook nature of like the poem that's anchoring everything, and now that we've talked about the movie, the fact that the storybook character is sort of the personification of a trauma.
Yep, grief, trauma, whatever it is.
And I think it's worth praising this film still, just that, like, I don't think it's fair to say this is derivative of Babadook, because I think in Possum it's much more about, like, the mystery box of Philip and kind of figuring out what's going on with him, whereas in Babadook you're a little more pulled out. You're not just, like, in the head of her.
Yes, there are definite similarities.
So though there's similarities, it's coming at it from a different angle. And another film, just to get on that whole, like, kind of slow pacing for the purpose of being like moody and getting you in a certain state. Under the Skin, it's A24 film. The one with Scarlett Johansson where she's like the alien.
It's another one I hadn't seen yet.
Oh, you need to check that one out.
On my list, man. It's on my list.
That too, again, it has that kind of like, it's deliberately slow for the sake of like, I want to build a mood and an atmosphere and pull you into a state of being, which I think is awesome. And then props to this film for having a fox despite their budget. And it looks good because I thought of The Green Knight, which Sean Harris is in. He plays King Arthur, so he's only in it a little bit.
That's right.
But I just want to remind everyone that had the fucking most terrible, atrocious CGI fox.
Yeah.
And there was like no damn reason for it.
That was a disappointing movie altogether.
Yeah. So let's get into this then. What's going on in this film? I think before I give my summation, I want to know maybe what you think a little bit. Like there's an ABC plot that we can follow, I think. But there's enough gray area that there's a lot of stuff that's not clear, that's not spelled out.
Right.
And there's room to draw your own conclusions.
Sure. Well, I've heard that there's some theories that Morris is even real.
Yeah, I want to get into that because I kind of think he's not real.
That he's a figment of Philip's imagination.
Yeah.
And by extension, you could say that almost the entire movie is just like the scenes where he's like huddling in the alley and the cops are driving by. Did that even happen? Are the cops even outside? Is he just being paranoid?
Right.
You know? And if Morris isn't real, that means that he's the one that abducted the schoolboy.
Yes, that's what I want to get into. But
we'll wait. He opens the trunk and the kid sees this guy who abducted me. I'm getting the fuck out of here. You know? And the whole thing is just in his mind, he's wrestling with his urges.
Right.
Between what he knows is good and what is bad.
Because Possum represents that. Possum is Morris, what he did to him. And all those sort of darker thoughts and ideas.
Right.
Okay. So we're in a similar space. So let me get into this. So
now, do I agree with that interpretation? I don't know.
Oh,
I don't know. I don't know if I do or not. Okay. But please continue.
We'll save your personal thoughts for your little segment. So, Yeah, I saw a lot of theories online, and there was one theory that I kept going back to that's like this is pretty close to how I feel, but I feel a little different from it. So, to walk you through this, let's just like look at this like boom top level zoom out. So we have Philip. He lost his parents at a little young age. We know that there's this burned room. He's afraid to enter it, and that's tied up in that. They died in the fire. That orphaned him because he's orphaned. Maurice came into the picture.
And it's inferred that he may have somehow caused the fire. I think that's what
Potentially,
I get.
yes.
Yeah.
They call him an uncle. Is he? We don't know. Probably not. We get the whole like thing of the boy being abducted, and that this has happened before, and it happened once in the past, and Morris kind of teases him about it, and so eventually we learn that it was Philip that was the abducted boy. And so to be the way I kind of read it was like, through his abuse, Morris denied him of any kind of normal childhood, and that left him in this sort of like mentally and emotionally stunted state where he's very childlike in a lot of his aspects. And we see that all throughout the film. It's the way he moves, the way he walks with his hands held down like that awkwardly, that he has trouble verbally communicating. He won't speak much unless he really has to. And then interactions with other people. When he speaks to that teacher at the school, he gets a very like, oh, yes, sir. Oh, no, sir.
Yeah.
And it's very much a child speaking to an adult figure.
Yeah, and he's calling the secretary Miss,
Yes.
like they do
Miss
there.
and ma'am. And so the story of Possum, and it's in this like, picture book thing, I think that was like a thing that he made for himself as a means to like cope and like take what was going on to him and like framing that in a childlike story for himself. And when we get that in the poem that I read, if you want to go back and look into that, you have these allegories of like a destroyed childhood, both in the poem and the visual scene we get of these, bright, vibrant balloons that get tainted black instead. Possum creeping up into the bed with him the same way that Morris was sexually violating him. And so like, Possum is like the personification of that like predatory nature.
Yeah.
And the way it's framed in the poem, it's like that is a thing that's after you. It's after like as it frames it, if you're an orphaned kid, it's coming for you. But as it's in the film, I think also it gets into like it's also a thing that's like an aspect of every person that potentially could,
Right.
target you, to creep up on you, to inhabit you, to be a part of you.
Yeah.
And a lot of the film is him. Is he going to give into that or reject it or embrace it? And then that gets us into the weeds of, is Morris even there? Is he even real?
Right.
Is he alive at any point in the film? I feel like it's not, because we never see him as like an agent in the movie. He's always just reactionary. He won't even hear him in the house, and then he steps into a room and suddenly he's there.
Yeah. Right.
And you can imagine it's like these were the spots he was always at when he was a kid. He was always sitting in the kitchen reading the paper. He was in his little study room with a book. He was out back burning the trash. But we never see him as like a free kind of agent that moves through the house or about the house. Yeah. Or if that happens, it happens off camera, which is clever because that makes like the gray area to have this theory. So it seems to me it's more like a projection of Philip's recollection of him. So let's extrapolate this further, right? We know at some point Philip left and went away. And when he left, he became a puppeteer, which was something he was taught from by Morris.
Right.
And we know that he had some success at that. He was doing good for himself. But at some point, something caused him to kind of get back into the trauma that he had had. And I would like to theorize that that was the death of Morse. He's an older guy. I think that maybe something like that happened, like he just passed away of old age or illness or whatever.
Okay.
And the knowledge of that, kind of brings all that back up again.
And Philip was like, well, he was never brought to justice.
Right. And it's sitting with him and it's stewing in him. And then that prompts him to try to like share that story with people and process it like you would want to do as a person. And as an artist, he tries to do it through his art, which involves making Possum. And then he did some, actual puppeteer show with that. I'm sure just brutally and mentally scarring everyone that was watching it.
Right.
Ruined his career, put him into this thing where he has to go back home in disgrace. And I think, to me, he's coming home to kind of like lay to rest those feelings and that emotion and that story and kind of put it to end. And so I think that's also why when he comes back, the house is so dilapidated because, Morris is dead, there's no one to even upkeep the place at this point.
Right.
It's just a ran down, abandoned house as far as anyone really knows.
And also famously, houses often, are a metaphor for one's mind.
And so this is where I differ now, because when you read online, this is like pretty much like this goes along with a lot of theories you see. And where it ends up is people say, so he then abducts the kid to like recreate the scenario of you've got Possum and it's attempting to prey upon this child. And in Philip's case, nothing happened about that. No one stood up to Possum. No one rejected Possum. And it like destroyed him. And then in kind of confronting his demons and his memories of Morris, he frees the kid and it like fixes the situation and kind of like is like exorcising the demon. I don't know that I like that because it's a little too clean, and I get it. And I've seen like where people have really gotten in on this film and they're like, you, at the end of the day, you like Philip. You kind of want things to turn out okay for him.
Yeah.
I think I kind of read it a little darker. I think that and this is where we can kind of cycle back to the Nickelodeon documentary, abuse is a cycle.
Right.
And the same terrible things that have been preyed upon one person, it's very possible if they don't have the proper help, the proper treatment, the proper, things in their lives to kind of make everything straight with that, they can become that same person
right.
and continue that cycle of abuse and prey upon someone else. So I think that he targeted that kid because when he looked at him, he saw himself. Here's the quiet kid. He's a drawing. He's by himself.
Yeah.
He's not so outspoken or outgoing.
Right.
Abducts him. And then that's the struggle of then do I continue down this path
right.
or do I reject it? Which still at the end, he does reject it, but it's not so clean cut, I think.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
to conclude, I guess thoughts about the film.
Yes.
I fucking love it, start to finish. I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's required viewing if you're a horror fan that likes the cerebral mental stuff, because literally everything I said, none of that could be true, and you could have a totally different interpretation, and your interpretation would be totally valid,
right,
and also interesting. So I'm 5 fucking stars all the way.
Okay, all right. Yeah. I have one question for you though.
Okay.
Is this elevated horror?
I don't know that it's set out to try to be, but absolutely I would say it is.
Okay, good deal. Yeah.
So where are you both theories and then also your feelings?
On the theories, I like the theory that maybe Morris is not real. I mean, this is basically a 2-person play.
Right.
Michael would have loved this movie.
He would have, yeah. This is one I wish we had him on.
This could work as a play very well. But yeah, I mean, we don't see anyone else interact with Morris at any time.
Never.
So he could very well be a figment of his imagination, part of him wrestling with his past and his urges and things like that. But I agree with you that, yes, I think that if that's the case, and it's kind of a coincidence that Morris would have been the one to abduct the same schoolboy that he had spoken to earlier, that Philip had spoken to. So I think Philip did abduct him.
Yeah.
Also, you can even read it as in he has that urge to abduct him. Maybe he actually didn't. You know, because like I was saying, a house could be a metaphor for the mind.
Right.
And this house is dilapidated and in ruins. And he won't go through that door. And Morris keeps taunting him. Not only was that his parents' bedroom that they apparently burned to death in, but also the boy's being kept in there.
Right.
So is he going to go in that room and do what he wants to do to this boy?
Right.
Or is he not? So that's all part of the internal struggle. So definitely, I think the theme is that abuse is cyclical, and what you visit on other people is just going to be cycled again and again and again. I think it can be read both ways. That's what I like about it.
Yeah, that's a good layered, mindfucky film.
Right. I don't think it detracts from it if you read it that way. I don't think both ways work.
I mean, you could also do like the most ABC plot of all. It's like he goes home and Morris abducts a kid and he saves the kid.
Yeah,
and prevents what happened to him once before.
Right. But yeah, I like how cagey it is. How many details it withholds. Like you don't find out what he did.
Yeah, till the very end.
You see the kids calling him a pervert, but also, is that also in his head?
Right.
Because there's also a scene where he's on the playground and he sees two women kind of looking at him.
Yeah.
We don't hear what they're saying, and they just sort of like exchanging
whispering to one another. Yeah.
And they walk in the opposite direction. And this is what something who feels guilty or persecuted might imagine people saying
Right.
about themselves, especially if, do they know I have these urges? Do they know I want to do these things?
And that's the cleverness in what they show and don't show. Because if they had showed the kid being taken, that then locks in so many things.
Right. So I like that ambiguity. I like the fact you can read into it whatever you want. You can, choose your own adventure. It's great. Yeah, I mean, to echo what you said, it's a very well done movie. The music is amazing. The locations are fantastic. The acting is top notch. There's very few faults to find in this movie. Yeah, it's that kind of perfect horror movie for me, at least in the broad strokes, because I just love the psychological horror of it. I love the old fashioned approach it has. I just love a good dreary.
This is our shit, man. There's not always a happy ending.
Yeah, emotionally draining movie. I dig it. It's my jam.
Just hit the plunger and flush that shit and go on.
So yeah, I'm gonna be with you on this one. I'm gonna give it 5 stars.
Woo! Now, a 5-star from Jason, that is like legendary praise.
Yeah, I was waffling there for a minute, but then I'm like, why be so stingy with it? I mean, it's great. It's a great movie. You
literally gave like no criticism.
Yeah,
the entire time,
I can't think of anything negative to say about it. I really can't. So yeah, I mean, if you like this type of, if you like Eraserhead, if you like any David Cronenberg or Lynch, if you like The Possessor, this is your kind of movie.
Hell yeah.
Check it out.
And thank you so much, Erica, for pitching this one at us. You know us well, I guess, to select this one.
Yep, it's good stuff. Good stuff. All right.
Well, another episode has come to an end, my friend.
Yep. Which means that we need to pick another movie.
We do. Yeah, where are you going to take us next?
Oh, God. I don't know. All right.
I mean, you're not going to follow up this with anything, so just vanquish that from your mind, so.
All right. Okay, let's do this. I don't know if this is streaming anywhere. It may not be. You may have to go to the gray market or something for this.
Uh-oh.
But this is one I've been reserving for you for a while, Dustin.
Oh, no. Okay.
It's all for you.
Uh-oh. A little Omen reference there.
From 1997.
Oh, okay. 90s. Fuck yeah. Let's go.
I don't think you've seen this yet. It's a movie called Kichiku Dai Inkei, a.k.a. Banquet of the Beasts.
Oh.
A Japanese horror film.
Okay. I am unfamiliar with that.
Directed by Kazuyoshi Kumakiri.
Kumakiri, yeah, cool. Okay.
It is a movie I picked up as a blind buy back in the day when Best Buy still sold DVDs. Mm-hmm. And this was during that big Asian explosion, or almost anything, a newer Asian film was being released, especially a Japanese horror film. And I saw it there, and I'm like, ooh, what's this? I don't know what this is.
Is that a badger on the poster there?
It could be.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Cool. Looks like it had a DVD release back in the day that's out of print. Otherwise, it's not streaming anywhere unless you're a fan of effed up movies and you somehow know how to go on the internet and find yourself some effed up movies.
Yes.
It is available in that sort of place.
Yeah,
that's all I'll say.
Yeah, if you like effed up movies, there's places you can go to watch effed up movies.
Okay, cool.
The poster I'm looking at has like a photo negative of a dude's face.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know
I guess there's several.
You're looking at. Yeah, probably. I haven't seen this since I bought it, actually.
Okay.
But I liked it a lot, and I think you might too.
Okay.
And I think some members of our audience might like it.
Do you want to tell us anything about it? Any tease or?
Sure.
Let it be a total surprise.
The it's considered a drama horror.
Okay.
And the blurb about it, courtesy of IMDb, is: while the leader is in jail, his leftist group is controlled by his girlfriend, but her leadership lacks conviction and perspective. When the leader commits suicide in prison, despair and confusion rule the group, and revenge and violence erupts in graphic ways.
Wow, okay. So this is kind of political focused then, huh?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. I'm into it.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I don't know that I've seen any of the other films by Kumakiri here. I was just looking at his filmography. I don't think I'm noticing anything that I know.
Yeah, I hadn't seen anything else.
I've heard of some of the ones.
Still making movies.
Yeah, he just made #Manhole in 2023.
I don't know what that is. It's like Mermaid in a Manhole.
Okay, yeah, apparently it's a guy who's like a fancy real estate guy, and then on his wedding night, he has like a bachelor party, he gets drunk, falls down a manhole, and then he's stuck down there and can't get out.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll watch that sometime.
I'm into that, sure.
Cool, all right.
Alrighty. Buckle up for that then.
Yep.
Otherwise, this has been a super fun episode, and again, I just want to say again, Possum is out there, it's easy to get at. You might want to give it a watch. Here, this is one of those ones I say seek it out. You owe it to yourself to give it a try.
Unless you don't like boring horror movies, then don't watch it. It's not. It may not be for you, but
what are you doing listening to us talk?
Yeah. Obviously, you're into boring things.
But yeah, it's been fun. Let us know what you've been watching. Let us know what you think is cool. We're always happy to take suggestions. We want more of these Possum episodes where you've given us a film and we check it out and we're like, oh my fucking God. This is so cool.
We want more bleak despair. Give it to us.
Destroy our souls. And you can reach out to us and tell us such things on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. You can email us at genreexposure@gmail.com. Shoot a flare into the sky, see what happens.
You will not find us on Truth Social, however.
Does that still exist?
Oh, for now.
Okay, well, yeah, you won't find us there, but you can always just Google Genre Exposure and find us places too. We're on YouTube. You can ring the bell if you want, but it's just a mirror of the podcast. So
yeah,
it's really just for you weirdos that like podcasts on YouTube. So
you want to watch a static image for an hour and a half?
Mm-hmm. Okay,
freak.
Sure. I don't judge. No judgment here. But
I like freaks. That's a compliment.
Otherwise, you've been listening to Genre Exposure.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.